It's now time for this month's broadcast of Learning Now TV.
Welcome to our early August edition of Learning Now TV. We're bringing to you a week ahead of schedule because of bank holidays and people being away. Maybe the UK might get some nice weather. Depends where you are in the world, of course. Nigel is in the depths of winter at the moment where he is. And I think the UK probably isn't that different, Nigel.
I think it's pretty much exactly right. I'm in New Zealand. Winter in New Zealand equals summer in the UK, which is depressing on every front, I have to tell you. So I've just managed to survive the gales and the driving rain in order to be here in a strange environment. You probably noticed the posters and stuff on the wall is not my usual backdrop. Anyway, this is the August programme. Doesn't make it any the less fascinating, the fact that Kate is in Wales and I'm in New Zealand, and we're both communicating to you across the globe to tell you about the highlights of this month. So this month, Ajay Pangakar, I interviewed Ajay and we talked about learning impact. It's something he's really passionate about, getting away from measuring interest and focusing on measuring impact. What a big difference there is between those two words. Absolutely fantastic. Then I talked to Tom Griffiths from Sponge. Sponge have released a report called Sustainability Learning Trends 23 report, and Tom is the author. And we're really talking about embedding sustainability into business processes. So not compliance stuff, marginal tick box opportunities, but real deep embedding. Really fascinating conversation with Tom. I really learned a lot from talking to him. And then Martin is back with another research report. This time it's Mind Tools, turning pressures into opportunities. So lots of big interviews, plus our regulars, Robin Hoyle talking about stop using the term soft skills. And I've been saying that for 5 or 6 years. It's a terrible term. Doesn't describe what we're talking about at all. I call them power skills, because they're really impactful and people need them virtually more than anything else, because they're the skills that allow you to build other skills. Anyway, let me stop ranting. And Bob Mosher concludes his series on virtual instruction for performance. And Bob finishes. Stella is still midway through on her series on the brain and learning. This is the 4th episode. Amazing. So in spite of being August, in spite of being rain and wind, we've got a fantastic program.
We're keeping it warm even if the weather's not. And check out, we've got some new regular series, I believe, from different contributors coming soon. So whilst Bob is wrapping up, and we've got that, and we'll have that in the archive for you to go back over, which I recommend if you've missed any of the previous ones. We've got some exciting new contributors coming up as well. So enjoy the show.
It's a real privilege to get the chance to talk to Ajay Pangakar. I've known Ajay for a long time, but it's his first entry into the world of Learning Now TV, which will prove very exciting for him, no doubt. And today, I want to talk about the book that he's writing, which is called The Art of Learning Metrics. But the subtitle is the interesting one, How to Measure the Impact of Organizational Learning. We're going to talk about that. Now, Ajay is the founder of Central Knowledge, and he's a professor at the Sprott School of Business in Carleton University in Ottawa, and that's where he lives, and that's where he's talking to me from. So, Ajay, welcome to Learning Now TV. It's great to have the chance to talk to you.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Nigel, and it's always a pleasure to be with LNTV. It's fantastic to be here. Thank you.
Good, excellent. I'm glad to hear that. Now, the book, First of all, tell me, what is it about? How do you measure the impact of organizational learning?
Well, this is what I use with a lot of learning and development people. I remind them of one thing, that the learning function is a business activity expected to deliver business results within a business context. And one thing that I think we often forget in L&D, and we strive to try to find it, and I think this is where people struggle, is how do you measure that connection between what we do in learning and how it delivers operational results within the organization. And that connection is what I'm trying to bring forth within the book when we talk about aligning with operational metrics within the organization. And that at its core is really what it's about, is making sure we're actually making that business connection with learning output to where the organization is going and improving their performance.
I think that's long overdue, that people talk about it, but we need a bigger focus on it. So I hope that this book is an absolutely huge success. So let's ask the question: how do you measure the impact? What would, if I'm a naive L&D person saying, this is quite interesting, I've never really thought, I've just got lots of happy sheets and so on. How do you take that step from being what I call it inward learning and development to outward learning and development, looking at the entire business and how I relate to the bigger picture of business performance? How do you do that?
Okay, so first, let me dispel something, and this is a bit of tough love with the L&D space. We focus too much on the learning. Now, I know that might seem a little controversial to say. However, we often forget that, yes, we are the subject experts in that space, and that's what we're hired for, to develop learning initiatives. Learning is the vehicle that allows us to get to a destination. And the destination is not about learning, it's about operational results. So how do we do that? Now, you mentioned the smile sheets or the happy sheets that we get in these sessions or e-learning courses. It's a little bit backwards, in my opinion. So this, what we call the smile sheets or the level 1 reactions, comes from the Kirkpatrick 4 levels of evaluation. What I've always felt, and I've written articles on this over and over again with either various publications, but I won't get into it, but we tend to go from level 1 to level 4, meaning we look at how the participants react and try to get to level 4, which is how does it impact the business. What we're doing wrong, in my humble opinion, is that we should be doing this in reverse. Stephen Covey once said, you begin with the end in mind, right? So you always begin with the end objective. What is the expectation from the business? What are they trying to do? What are they trying to achieve? And then you work back from that, because that's what you're trying to influence or improve. And so when you know that destination from the stakeholders' perspective, the people paying for that training, then you can work back and say, okay, if we know this is the destination, whether it's increasing market share, improving quality within the organization, whatever the major metric is, we can now dissect that and work backwards and say, okay, if it's quality, what do you define quality as? Is it improved customer service? Is it reducing defects within the organization? And I like to work with simple examples, Nigel. So if let's take defects, we're trying to reduce product defects because the company is getting a significant amount of returns in their products. Okay, let's start with that. Well, then that's the business impact. If we can improve that, great. Well, why are we having these defects? Is it because the process has changed or something has changed within the process? Then it has nothing to do with training. That is process related. Let them fix that. But if it is training related, then maybe we hired new staff. Maybe we have new machinery or equipment that people are not adequately trained on, and they're not doing the right procedures. Well, guess what? Now, that's level 3. If we get them to do that better, then we can work backwards and ensure that they have the right skill instilled with level 2, right skills instilled in them. And then, of course, develop a training that's targeted to make that happen. Now, I'm using a very simple example. I know things get a little more complex, but this just illustrates that if we work backwards from the destination, then we know the delivery vehicle, meaning the learning effort, will focus exactly on what's needed and fix that problem and actually arrive at business impact. Now, if viewers and listeners understand this, I hate to say it, I've just described my book in a few minutes. So, I want them to buy the book because I go in a lot more detail, full disclosure, so self-promotion here. But if they don't, that's all they need to recall and remember. And they need to work on that part. That's really the focus of where we're going with the book, is making sure you're connecting with those key operational outcomes.
And it's astonishing that in 2023, you really have to spell that out. It should have been the way everyone thinks, but it's not. They've got caught up in measuring the learning, making the learning perfect, focusing on the learning, and don't even consider often where it goes in the business.
Regretfully, and don't get me wrong, I mean, learning practitioners and who work in their environment are hired for that expertise. They are the subject experts for that role, and more power to them. But I think what we often forget is that in learning has always been, I always call it the middle child of the family, or even the spoiled child of the family a little bit, but the middle child of the family that often got forgotten. The younger child gets the attention, the older child gets the attention, the middle child gets ignored. And for years, learning prior to technologies and stuff that have come into play to improve our abilities, learning has been this thought where we're just going to dump money in there, get people skilled up and on their way. And not a thought was given otherwise that that's what the purpose is. But in days where we live in a very competitive environment, number one, every industry sector is in competition. Number two, change is now a constant reality. I'm writing in a book about innovation, where innovation is reality. Now, people think innovation, well, I have to create this new, better mousetrap, this better product. No, innovation at its heart is about how do we improve a process to become more efficient? How do we think of things differently within the organization? We don't have to build a better iPhone or whatever product we're trying to build. What we need to do is be a little more creative in our approach. Guess what? Learning plays a role. Now, here's another thing I think the learning practitioners don't realize, because their budgets always get cut. And I want to get to that point, Nigel, if you don't mind, but because their budgets gets cut, they don't think their senior leadership values them. But survey after survey has shown that senior leadership sees only one thing that allows them to differentiate themselves and be more competitive in the workspace, and that's having more knowledge. And of course, the biggest resource within the organization is people. And knowledge in people is key to making the organization succeed.
Yes, it does. So it sounds blindingly obvious, but it needs to be said, and needs to be said again. I also think that it will improve the status of learning. If you are a CEO and you see real improvements in performance in the organization, and you see that not exclusively, but that's partly at least down to the effort the learning team have made to focus on what the business needs at that particular time, you get status in the organization. I always used to describe the learning as the place where, when the carpet ran out, you had the thick pile carpet, you had the thin carpet, you had the kind of high quality flooring, and then you got to where the linoleum was worn out. That was where you'd find the learning team, disregarded, somewhere in the corner. I think this is one of the key ways to put learning front and center stage. And it's very important.
If you permit me to share some examples, real life examples that all of us recognize that we don't realize we recognize. We were, prior to the recording here, Nigel, we were talking about coffee. And one poster child, and full disclosure, I don't have shares or investments in this company, but Starbucks. I want people to do a thought experiment with me the next time they're in line at Starbucks ordering a coffee. Whether you like it or not, go to Starbucks and order a coffee. Order one of their already specialized coffee on the menu, because those coffees are already specialized coffees. And try this experiment in different cities, different states, different provinces, different countries. Try this experiment at every Starbucks you go to. I do this constantly. And I guarantee you that at about 98%, 99% of the time, that coffee is exactly the same, and it's delivered to you within 3 to 5 minutes when you order it. And the more you specialize it, it's even more precise. Now, you have to ask yourself, when you're doing this thought experiment, ordering this coffee, and you get your coffee, ask yourself, what did it take Starbucks to ensure that consistency? Because remember, all these coffees are made by people. And so how do I get Nigel or AJ to make sure that they make the same coffee over and over again, no matter where they are? That deals with all the learning function with the organization. So for Starbucks, learning is not an afterthought. It's an integrated cultural element that ties into key performance metrics within the organization to make sure that when I order coffee, I am consistently satisfied with Starbucks, and I'll keep going back to give my my money to them as much as it costs to get that coffee. But that's the value learning brings to that organization. So when your budget gets cut, you need to ask yourself, is it because they don't value you or you're not delivering value? And that's the question I always pose to learning and development.
It is a very important question. And when Starbucks were in trouble and they started closing stores, they actually increased their investment in learning. I knew the CLO, Michael Wright, there, and the value, the perception of the value of learning and its business impact goes right to the top of the organization, absolutely to the top. And it's true. And that is because Starbucks is a people-centered organization, obviously. And therefore, if you don't have consistency, if you have people who don't know what they're doing or don't care about what they're doing, you have a failed company. So you're 100% right. So I'm really hoping this book is a bestseller. I would love it to sell millions of copies, but at least get on the... Seriously, I would love it to sell millions of copies. But what we need is it to have some resonance within the L&D community, and I'm sure it will. There's a crawl on the screen. If you register for the book now, when it's coming towards publication, it's not out yet. As soon as it comes towards publication, you'll be informed and you'll get a 20% discount voucher. Hey, what's not to love about that? So I encourage you to register. I encourage you to follow AJ Pangakar because he's got a lot more to say than just about business impact. That's important, but there's lots of other things he has to say about strategy and other ways that learning can really resonate through the organization. But until that point, I'd like to say, AJ, such a pleasure to talk to you. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck with the build up to the big launch.
Nigel, listen, I hope your words carry, out there into the ether and really resonate, because I do hope it does make a difference. And I want people to rethink how they look at learning. And I don't say the value of learning is invaluable. What you do in learning is very valuable, but it's the delivery of that context into the organization to build, as you pointed out, credibility. So thank you for having me and interviewing me today for the book. And I look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Great pleasure, AJ. Thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it.
Upskill and inform your learners with Mind Tools for Business. Empower your people to thrive at work and help them step up and meet everyday workplace challenges with confidence. Our toolkit provides unlimited access to thousands of quality-assured resources, all in one place. It's easy to use and on demand, anytime, anywhere. Experience stress-free onboarding with dedicated client partner support. And get access to our library of industry insight and expert analysis. Perform, manage, lead with Mind Tools for Business. Visit mindtoolsbusiness.com to find out more.
The inimitable Robin Hoyle returns this month talking about something that I think, Nigel and I feel very strongly about, and that is just urging people to stop using the term soft skills. Nigel referenced power skills in the opening. I think Amy Edmondson or someone like that talks about power skills a lot as well. It's something that I've adopted in the last year. If we look at the rate of change around so-called hard skills, actually, these soft skills really are the foundation. So take it away, Robin, suck it to them.
In my role, I spend a reasonable amount of my time talking to people about what their challenges are. And it's unusual for those conversations not to include reference to communication skills at some point, whether that is people within teams saying that the communication from the top of the organization down is poor, or whether it's people working across teams saying that they don't understand each other, or whether it is people at the top of the organization saying we need feedback, we need information from those delivering on the ground and we're not getting it. There doesn't seem to be the right ways of explaining to us what is happening in ways that we can both understand and take action about. So there's a general dissatisfaction, and very often that's blamed on lockdowns and the pandemic and the fact that people got out of the habit of communicating. But that's too easy, I'm afraid. If you go back pre-2019, pre-2020, when the lockdown started, actually you'll find just as many articles and reports and research papers and studies which show that communication skills were considered to be pretty poor then. And in fact, that's something that's repeated throughout my career. I've been involved in L&D now for 35 years. And actually, communication skills has always been an issue across organisations, and it's never got very much better. And some organisations are trying to do something about that, but unfortunately, they refer to this as kind of soft skills training, or they'll give it something which sounds a little bit better, like emotional intelligence training or something like that. And I'm often wondering why they don't just look at the individual behaviours that good communicators use and say, well, how can we help people to replicate those behaviours? What is it that good people do that less effective communicators don't do? What is it that less effective communicators do that good communicators avoid doing? And that seems to me to move it away from being a set of soft skills to being something much more analytical, something which can be changed, where we can help people to change their behaviours practically on one behaviour at a time. But what actually happens most often if I go on to some kind of program around soft skills or emotional intelligence is that I'll develop self-awareness through some kind of profiling tool, but I won't necessarily be given any other insights about how I can improve. I might get some feedback from this profiling tool which says that I need to demonstrate better active listening, but I won't be told how to do that. I won't be told what behaviours I should use to enable me to be seen as somebody who actively listens really effectively. Now, compare that with some of the more quote-unquote hard skills training, like say I wanted to learn how to use Excel. If I wanted to improve my spreadsheet skills, I would be short-changed, I think, if I had some kind of assessment which gave me a profile and said, oh, I'm good at this, I'm not so good at this, now if you go and find out how you're going to do the things you can't do better. I would expect to be helped, and indeed I probably would be. But when it comes to communication skills, somehow it feels a little bit too difficult or too personal or too intrusive to say to people, actually, you interrupted somebody 7 times in that last 10-minute conversation. How about you try not to interrupt and see whether or not the communication works better this time? And run it that way. And in actual fact, if we can get people to think about those micro behaviours which together make somebody a good communicator, then we might actually move away from thinking about soft skills and just start thinking about skills and capability. Because believe me, all of those organisations who say that communication skills are not as good as they should be are all really worried about it because they recognise it is the lifeblood of their organisation to improve at those things. Well, if it's that important, stop referring to it as soft skills, which makes it sound optional, and don't give it fancy names like emotional intelligence unless you've got something to back that up and to help people become more intelligent emotionally as they go through your programs. And from what I've observed, many of them don't.
It's always a pleasure to speak to people from Sponge Learning. I've spoken to a number, but this is the first time I've ever had the chance to talk to Tom Griffiths, who is the learning experience consultant in Sponge Learning. And he's coming to talk to me today about a new report which Sponge have just released called the Sustainability Enablement Trends Report. So welcome, Tom, first of all.
Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Now, tell us what this report is all about. What makes it special? What makes it different from tens of other sustainability reports that you see knocking around? What has Sponge done this time that's different and interesting?
I think it's around the report itself is a guide for industry leaders, and it's for them kind of just to seek that better understanding around the strategies and the tactics that we see of large organizations that they're trying to use to kind of engage their workforces, engage their partners, and support them in meeting their environmental commitments. The report itself, based on a lot of insights that we gathered this year from Learning Technologies, we really kind of look at the importance of sustainability for those businesses, and then looking at how we can uncover kind of the role of that technology-enabled learning programs that really play in raising that awareness of those environmental issues. There's parts of the report where we look at upskilling workers in kind of green practices. We want to change perceptions within the organisation and also of the organisation as well. A lot of it kind of talks about awareness, but it's not just about raising awareness anymore or ensuring compliance. We're really kind of looking at a holistic approach.
A bigger picture.
And the report... Yeah, the report really looks to try and capture that and really kind of incorporate sustainability into an organisation's transformation strategy, how we can go about doing that, and kind of what underpins that is kind of the development of the skills that provide kind of that support and create the success of that kind of business priority, really.
So what are the problems that sustainability teams face, and how will you help them?
Sustainability teams themselves are, in our experience, relatively kind of in their infancy compared with other teams in the business. They're often much smaller than other teams, especially when compared to like company size, and they're getting more and more kind of responsibility. So they're there to kind of help the business develop on their strategy. And in my experience, it's not a case of those teams not working well. It's down to the kind of size of task that they have at hand, really. They're the go-to resource. So the kind of difficulties kind of that we have around there is how can we help them enhance their effectiveness? We really want to kind of help them free up that valuable resource that they have, that expertise that they have in these small teams. And that might be from finding support from a partner, how we can deliver change across a campaign rather than historical kind of single impact pieces. We want to find how we can help them prioritize tasks and challenges where they can really focus that expertise and really kind of embed that across the business.
Where does L&D fit in to all of that then? So this is about sustainability teams. You're absolutely right that locking into business process and locking into the main core objectives of the organisation, so they're not sitting out on a limb as a kind of nice to have but not very important. Bring them into the heart. Where and how can L&D help?
So I think for L&D, it's recognising that in the past, we as L&D professionals might be guilty of kind of enabling that box ticking exercise that would happen around sustainability, where we would maybe source off the shelf content to deliver on an awareness piece for sustainability. This in the report is kind of where we bring in the term corporate cringe. So learning was kind of previously maybe churned out to meet business targets rather than really trying to kind of connect with the employees and really sort of tap into that kind of social responsibility level.
So get beyond box ticking, basically. Get beyond, we do that, and it has really limited impact. So get to the hearts and minds of the staff rather than just tick a few boxes and sign the form and send it off. That's what you're saying, isn't it?
Absolutely. Shifting the culture within an organisation, that's absolutely where L&D fit. It is a challenge, but that's where we can add the real value.
Yes. What about upskilling? Do you think that's important? Is there a whole bunch of competence needs in sustainability teams that you need to address? Did you find that in your research for the report?
Yeah, I think there is upskilling. It's around the broader range of topics as well. So something of part of this kind of culture change that we would look for is finding how we can use internal ambassadors to help with that culture shift. They would then help with embedding any kind of marketing, any messaging, any learning, anything around sustainability. We can really sort of tap into that and really kind of accelerate that change. Importantly, they'll act as a feedback loop as well. So kind of any sustainability skills, any sustainability knowledge, they're going to form an important part of kind of job experience, and people's career progression is going to factor that in now as well. So in terms of upskilling, as we see sustainability teams grow, there's going to be new roles created within the business, within those teams, and that's going to kind of expand out further. That's going to reach into new departments, new teams. So bringing people kind of on this journey and supporting them to get these new skills is absolutely part of the process.
Yes.
We've got things. Sorry.
No, I was just going to say, I completely agree with everything you're saying. I was just going to read, quote back to you your own words as the author of the report, but it seems to sum it up really well. It's not enough to simply raise awareness, ensure compliance and drive upskilling. Rather, holistic approach is required that incorporates sustainability into an organization's transformation strategy that leads to the development of skills that provide ongoing support to this key business priority. That's the essence of what you've been saying, isn't it? It's a holistic approach, and it's about driving standards up, integrating the sustainability teams, and making the whole thing one awful lot more effective than it is in some organizations at the moment. That's the essence of it, isn't it?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's broadening out the umbrella. We've seen things like stakeholder management. We've seen things like data collection come up in when we talk about upskilling in the past. But when we think about that through a sustainability lens, we can tie that to things like ethical decision making. We can tie that to analysis of kind of data which supports sustainability change. And when we think about kind of focusing on skills development, that they're no longer two things that sit separately from one another, but they are intertwined.
Yes.
And I think that's how we engage that workforce. That once we have the engaged workforce, we then have that real drive and that kind of everyone focusing in the same direction to achieve on that kind of business strategy, business goals, yes, because they align then to individual goals.
Yes. And to prove your point, you're organising a round table, aren't you, to discuss the report?
So, yeah, we are. So for anyone who's interested, we are hosting a roundtable. It's a bit of an online fireside chat, and that's with some of our clients who we've worked with on these sustainability solutions. We can really bring those to life, dig into those in a bit more detail.
Tom Griffiths, thank you so much for talking to me. I appreciate your time, and I really hope you have a very, very good roundtable and that this is a kind of sea change for lots of organisations.
Thanks again for having me. Appreciate it.
Next up, Stella Collins returns with the fourth, if you can believe it already, part in her series looking at learning and the brain. And this month, she and colleague Karen Moos talk about neuroplasticity. I'm glad I was able to say that without messing that up, but it's a good one.
Welcome back to our series on neuroscience in learning. And today we're going to be talking about neuroplasticity, brain wiring. I'm very happy to have Karen back with us again today. Hi. So welcome back, Karen. So our brains use glucose, electricity, and chemicals to fuel the activity of connected networks of neurons, which are covered with fatty sheaths called myelin sheaths. But how do they connect? Now, it just so happens the structure of the brain is the same for everybody. But at the same time, every brain is different because of those multiple connections that form and reform as you learn, as you grow, as you develop, as you mature, and as you age. You might have heard a myth that the brain is fixed. When I was young and learning at university, we were told the brain was fixed and it couldn't really change. But actually, we now know that brains can change and do change, but they need work and they need time. So Hebb's law is a really famous law that talks about neurons that fire together, wire together. And that's what starts to create these networks, which are what enable us to do all the smart things we can do. But whilst neuroplasticity is really useful and can help us to change and rewire our brains actually want to resist change because change is energy consuming. All that glucose, electricity, and chemicals have to come from somewhere. So what we tend to do is have networks switch each other on and off, creating different functions in our brain. So the different networks connect, but some of them turn each other on and some of them turn each other off. we have a default network, which is when you're kind of relaxed, when you're in a kind of perhaps a daydreaming state, or just not really thinking about anything very hard at all, where the brain starts to create wider connections at the brain and it switches off the attention network. So what does this mean for us in terms of experimenting with the process of neuroplasticity and building new connections when we really want to do that in the real world of learning at work? Karen.
Yeah. One in-between step that we often use is, like you said, experiment. In this phase, we want people to think creatively and make new connections that they otherwise maybe wouldn't have made already. And what is our secret to achieving that? It is play. Now, play is often associated with how children learn. I mean, just watch a 3-year-old learning social conventions, learning how to throw a ball. They are playing, they are having fun. But fun is also really good for learning as adults because it triggers creativity. It will help increase the variety in new connections in your brain. And you will think outside the box. You will try new stuff and you will be enjoying it, which is one of the main characteristics of play, that joy, which has that high glucose cost. If you're having fun, it's worth the cost for your brain. Some other characteristics of play are adding meaning to situations, being very actively engaged, doing things over and over again in an iterative way, social interaction with each other. And that is very tightly connected to the learning processes that we already know. Think about rewards and feedback, better memory, cognitive flexibility to adapt to new situations, and even stress regulation. So how do you get started with that? Because, these are a lot of big words, but in fact, it doesn't have to be that complicated. Just think back to the games you used to love playing and adapt them to a setting that helps people learn. This can go from quizzing, having people make guesses, going on a scavenger hunt, even via Zoom, adding a mystery element or a storyline, puzzles, competition. I bet you can come up with at least 20 games that you can use. And one small tip in here, make those games multi-sensory. Don't rely on words or pictures alone. Make it tactile, get people moving, add shapes, envelopes with secret messages, drawings, physical puzzle pieces, and use the space that you're in, whether it's physical or virtual.
Thank you, Karen. And I think it's really important to add there that sometimes people think that people in senior positions don't want to play. And my advice is give them a go, because they are so bored of sitting in meetings. They absolutely love playing.
Exactly.
So thank you, Karen. That was really helpful. See you all again next time.
Bye.
Maybe we'll do that later. Hey, so you can see this is just like using a whiteboard in a classroom. And then you do my 3-year-old's favourite, you just have a nice little wiggle. 1, 2, 3, rate it now.
A really quick question, you might want to answer this later.
You see, I love this.
Bob Mosher concludes his series on virtual instruction for performance. This is the 5th and final episode, and I think you should have all 5 of them linked together somewhere, because they're a really interesting group of presentations which kind of nail the topic really well. So thank you, Bob, for doing that. And this is the 5th final, but fantastic episode for us.
Greetings once again, friends. Bob Mosier here. I am one of the co-founders of an organization called Apply Synergies, which hopefully you know by now because this is my fifth and final series in the How Virtual Instruction Empowers Performance. And I will tell you, it's been an honor to meet with you throughout the series. I do hope the first 4 videos helped. And in this fifth and final one, we're going to kind of put a bow around the whole thing. We're going to kind of step back and talk about some of the important principles that we talked about and really do our best at wrapping this all up into how virtual instruction really has eclipsed, I think, if I may, the classroom and changed the landscape of how L&D looks at what we do every day. As we've talked about repeatedly, friends, it's been a remarkable time in our world and in learning and development. And when we were thrust into this virtual instruction, more so than ever when COVID came along, right, and changed the way we looked at things, it really did give us a new way to discuss why and when we do formal instruction, be it virtual or classroom, to be honest, right? And when people went home and classrooms shut down, this medium emerged as the lifesaver of that entire platform. And it stuck with us. We still have it today. And as we've talked about throughout the series, some really important principles have emerged from it. And fundamentally, friends, what I want to be sure I talk about today and kind of wrap up with everything is I hope I've talked about the idea that it really has empowered learners. It's empowered instruction in a way that we've wanted to for years, frankly. And because we brought people into residential classrooms, I think, not maliciously, but by the nature of that design, we were not able to do it to the degree, and the doors have not opened, like virtual instruction has led us to today. So let's wrap up a couple points to talk about this. Because in the end, friend, if it's not about performance, instruction's moot, right? We're not about information. We're not about training people. We're not about them knowing stuff. We're not about them coming to us not knowing a lot and leaving knowing more. We are about enabling through our instruction, and not just formal, people so that they can perform. If when they finish what they consume from us and can't perform better, faster, more efficiently, and more importantly, continue to perform in those ways, we really haven't done our job. Well, virtual instruction has done some remarkable things for that medium, friends. Really, really remarkable. So a couple of principles to kind of wrap up with. Number one, this whole idea that it has forced us to look at chunking, how big our instruction is, right? Reducing the time in which we stand before or virtually stand before or engage people in classrooms. And the old days of 1 day, 2 weeks, 5 days of coming to a building are gone with this medium, and it removes that border and boundary. Although I have brick and mortar behind me, it has really taken that away from the formula. And we are now allowed to space instruction, chunk it in ways that make it much more consumable. And my second point being, it builds time into reflection and learning. We have time between these things, friends, if we do them right, for folks to practice. Only take in as much as they have to, and then go back and apply what they have learned and be able to come back to us after, check in, remediate, and move on. That's an incredibly powerful thing that the brick and mortar classroom, frankly, didn't allow us to do. Because once we got people there, we kept them there, and totally understand why we did that. So the idea of a time frame and looking at learning that way is completely out the window with virtual instruction if we allow it to be. I talked about spaced learning before, and I just mentioned it again. And also the biggest thing is this idea about applying and bringing into instruction tools like digital coach, performance support, job aids and coaching. These are remarkable tools that allow people to get in the workflow and be able to learn and apply there. So this whole series about enabling performance, if we pivot on that being the tip of the sword, this medium does it like nothing else could ever do it before. So let's use virtual not as the tip of the sword. Let's end with that idea. What if it was just one means, as I shared in the GEAR model, gather, expand, apply, receive feedback? It's one of 4 letters and frankly not the most powerful. Let's use this as a place where we start instruction, where we let people understand the critical skills that they have to go back and apply, but let's make this an enabling medium where we teach people how to fish, not feed them one, which we've done for far too long in formal instruction, be it e-based or face-to-face. So virtual instruction enables performance in ways that the classroom has not been allowed to, or we've not brought into our design. Let's break down those barriers. Let's use this remarkable medium to begin the learning journey, the performance journey, and enable it through the tools, the design, and the technology so that we can do this better for our learners. Friends, we hope the series has been helpful. You know where I live. Please follow up. And again, it's been an honor to host you through these 5 series. Please keep in touch, and I'll see you in Best in Learning. Take care.
We're back with another report selected for your delectation by the inestimable Martin Cousins. And today he's chosen a Mind Tools for Business report, which is called, quite a long title, Turning Pressures into Opportunities, Aligning Learning to Business Critical Priorities in the Real World, Not the Ideal World. So Martin, why did you pick this for us? What's interesting about it? And does it tell you how to do what it says it on the tin, or align learning to business critical priorities?
I think that's more the message, really. And I think the data really is telling that story, that the alignment isn't quite what it should be between learning teams and business leaders. So in this bit of research, 1,600 learning leaders have been surveyed, and just over 550 business leaders have been surveyed. So they've just been asked about, what their areas of priority are. And interestingly, that there isn't the convergence that you would hope to see. So it kind of, there are a few themes that come out of this. For example, business leaders believe that L&D should be focusing on the people-centric goals of the organisation. Now, they did this research a couple of years ago, and at that point, business leaders thought L&D should be focusing on, innovation and transformation. So now it's kind of reverted to talent, really. So 2/3 of leaders agreed that compared with other organisational goals, L&D can have the most impact on improving talent strategies, employee engagement and staff retention. So that's basically what leaders think L&D can do, but leaders themselves, business leaders themselves, are actually focused on, they're focused on reducing operational costs and transformation, growing the business. So that's where there's the divergence, and that's, that kind of the heart of this research is just flagging that up, that actually business leaders are shifting in their priorities and what they expect to see from L&D, and it looks like L&D isn't aligned with that. So I think that's that's kind of the story here, is that, basically the priorities are shifting, but is the learning function able to shift with them and respond in the right way?
But some of the most interesting point is that only 20% of learning leaders claim that they're kind of up to speed in evaluating impact. And yet 69% say we need these skills now. So there's this gap of, well, if you take their statistics as gospel, there's a 49% gap between what they know they need and what they can deliver. And all the way through the list, very interesting list of L&D capabilities, there is a mismatch pretty much everywhere between what L&D has in place and what is required immediately by the organization. They've got things that in place, ready to go, which they don't require, but mostly they've got things that the organization requires them to have immediately, but they don't have in place.
So that is, in some ways, just that one page of data it justifies all the comments that you've made up till this point. Do you agree, Martin?
Yeah, I think and I don't. If you follow MindTools research, you will see that this is a common theme. I think the interesting bit with this research is that it's putting that up against priorities for business leaders, and I think so. Not only is it a case of learning teams getting their house in order, it's actually also being aligned with the shifting sands of business priorities, and so I think there's that kind of that means there's a lot going on. There are some quite big challenges, but I think that there is an area here around data and impact and aligning that with business that has continued, is stubbornly remains a problem. So the number of L&D leaders reporting their team has business acumen has steadily declined from 45% in 2020 to 29% in 2023. Now that's extraordinary. I think, for as long as we've been doing this research slot on LNTV, we've talked about business impact and how learning teams are, seek to demonstrate business impact. And yet business acumen has declined, over the last 3 years. And also fewer than 1/3 of L&D teams work with their senior leaders to agree organisational metrics and KPIs for measuring the learning impact. So there isn't that communication isn't there. So I think that's one very big takeaway from this bit of research is there is a perception problem, and actually that in part can be helped if learning teams can talk to senior executives about what they're measuring and what impact is likely to be seen and how that is working. Because I think it's kind of it feels like there's a bit of mystery here, which there just shouldn't be.
Yes, I agree with you. There's a very good quote in the middle of the report which says, L&D has a responsibility to get to know and monitor the external forces that affect their organisation and its operation. Sounds logical, but all the way through the report is the absence of that we're not seeing that responsibility to get to know and monitor the external forces that are on the organisation. And as soon as you take your eye off that ball, the organisation goes in one direction and L&D goes in the other. And that seems to be the evidence that the report brings to bear. It's all about two bits of the organisation misaligned, not because the organisation is focusing in the wrong direction, but largely it's because L&D is focusing too little on the short term, too little on the future, and lacking strategic influence to help the business get to where it needs to get. They seem to be the major weaknesses that the report outlines. So it's a short report, isn't it, Martin? It's not very long, but it's worth reading simply to depress you. If you want a wake-up call, read this report, because there's not a lot of good news in it, is there?
No, but I think, don't forget, I think, to be fair, it's a tough place to be right now. So the idea that L&D teams are focusing on talent is not altogether surprising because of the whole skills story right now and the way that organisations are trying to change and having to upskill and reskill. So actually, that just has to be done. I think it's the way it's being perceived that might be the issue. So I think that maybe the good work is being done. I'm not trying to be deliberately glass half full here, but I think that it might just be to do with the perception and the communication around what is actually being worked on. And I think that will just take learning teams to build those communication bridges with the senior team and display how aligned they are and why they're spending time on talent right now and where that's going to take people, take the organisation in the coming months and years. So yes, it is depressing, but I think there are probably some useful prompts here for learning teams in terms of thinking about communication and perception, actually.
Yes, I completely agree with you. So again, the report is free to download. There's a crawl on the screen if you want to take a note of that or a photograph of it, and give it a go. It won't take you long to read, and there are some wake-up call ideas and some interesting data in there. So Martin, thanks for drawing that to our attention, as always.
Thank you.
Well, that's the programme over, and we're rolling forward into September. My goodness, and that really will be autumn when we do the next show going out at the end of September. What did you like, Kate? What's most useful to you from all of the interviews and the presentations today?
Well, I mean, much like yourself, Nigel, I can get on a soapbox all day long about impact. I think your conversation with AJ really struck a chord with me. I think that kind of differentiation between what people are interested in and what is impactful. I did a session last year with a lady from PMI, and she talked about, great, we can provide courses on underwater basket weaving. Stayed with me for ever since she said that, because people might be interested in that, but what does the business actually need people to be good at, and what does it need them to know? And I think that distinction, it just really hits home for me.
It's true. And it links in with the Sponge report, because what the Sponge report is saying is that if everything you do in learning isn't embedded in the business, you're kind of wasting your time. And so much of the sustainability stuff has been lovely to have, interesting add-on, bit of fun, maybe a bit of fluff, but no one takes it seriously. And what they're saying is, if you really mean to create a sustainable business and you want to share your abilities and knowledge of sustainability with others, then it's got to be a core part of what you do. So I guess that was a big theme running through. Learning has to be embedded in the business. It has to be measured as part of the business. And anything that is not part of the business is kind of not irrelevant, but certainly marginal. And we have to move closer to the heart of what organizations need in these incredibly changing times. So yes, you're absolutely spot on, Kate.
I think the thing as well is the way that the world has kind of flipped on its axis several times over the last few years. Some of what was an imperative, like working remotely or hybrid working, learning and skills, has suddenly gone back into that. Actually, D&I has suddenly gone back into that nice to have camp. And it's really so important that what Tom was talking about, all of these things, that can't happen. But ultimately, if you can relate it back to the bottom line, no company out there wants to be the next Kodak. So, fall by the wayside. So none of this is actually a nice to have. But it has to be framed in a way that helps the business, the CFO, the CEO, who's ever making the board, who's ever making these decisions, really understand that.
So let's talk about conferences. What's coming up, Kate? And I hope all this discussion that we've just had manifests itself somewhere in these events that you're going to tell us about.
Yeah, well, quite. And I think, we are swinging into that busy autumn period now. I'm, good, prepping myself for packing and repacking my suitcase quite a lot over the next few months. And I really hope that some of these big themes, we're going to see a lot about AI. Coming up, but some of these more practical themes around that bottom line, the sustainability, the impact, the ROI, all of those things, there should be some good discussions about all of that, and people being in the same boat as you, trying to get these wins, trying to make these business cases for investment and so on. So we kick off on the 13th and 14th of September in London with our friends at the Learning and Performance Institute with Learning Live. So looking forward to that. 10th and 11th of October, World of Learning returns to Birmingham, chaired by our very own Robin Hoyle. So check out that. It's bound to be, knowing Robin, there's bound to be a lot about the practical side of things we've just been discussing. On the 17th and 18th of October, so just the following week in Paris, is Unleash. I know that there will be a lot around the AI, the disruptive nature of what's happening there, but the practical side of things too. And then 17th of November, the Learning Network return with their Connect event. So was part of that for a very long time. It's a great event to really get stuck in with your peers, maybe, sort of figuring out some of these problems. And that's on in London. And then, before we know it, we'll blink and it'll be Christmas.
Indeed it will. But we'll be back on the 28th of September, so you can note that in your diary, and we'll see you then. Thanks very much, Kate. As always, it's great to talk to you.
Same, and see you next month.